I stood in my deceased parents' dilapidated Alaskan cabin, flashlight illuminating a hidden compartment behind rotted floorboards. Inside lay a geological survey report dated 3 months before my parents' death, revealing massive lithium deposits beneath the property worth $550 million. My hands shook as I realized my parents knew the truth but chose to give me the worthless cabin while my golden child brother Jake inherited their Miami mansion. My fiancée Jessica had called me a pathetic loser just days ago before leaving me for Jake. 3 weeks earlier, I had been kneeling beside 2 mahogany caskets in Portland's Riverside Memorial Chapel, my world crumbling around me. Robert and Linda Fletcher, my parents, had been taken from us in a head-on collision with a drunk driver on Interstate 84. The funeral home's sterile fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across my face as I gripped Jessica's hand, drawing what little comfort I could from her presence. My older brother Jake stood across the aisle, his perfectly tailored charcoal suit and polished Italian leather shoes making my off-the-rack department store ensemble look shabby by comparison. Even in grief, Jake maintained that confident posture that had always made me feel like the lesser Fletcher son. His wife Brittany dabbed her eyes with a designer handkerchief, though I noticed her tears seemed more performance than genuine sorrow. Growing up, I had always been the sensitive one, the dreamer who spent hours sketching wildlife and studying environmental science textbooks, while Jake focused on business networking and making money. Dad called me his nature boy. Mom said I had an old soul, but I knew they were proud when Jake landed his first real estate deal at 23. I pursued my master's degree in environmental consulting, driven by passion rather than profit margins. Jessica squeezed my fingers as Pastor Williams spoke about eternal rest and heavenly reunions. We had been planning our engagement for months, and I carried my grandmother's vintage diamond ring in my jacket pocket, waiting for the right moment to propose. Jessica worked as a marketing coordinator downtown, and we had dreams of buying a small house in the suburbs, maybe starting a family within a few years. The reception afterward felt surreal. Relatives I barely recognized offered condolences while balancing paper plates of cold cuts and potato salad. Jake networked even here, discussing property values with Uncle Paul, while Brittany showed off her recent breast augmentation to the younger cousins. I found myself standing alone by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. Jessica appeared beside me with 2 cups of coffee. "You holding up okay, sweetheart?" Her voice carried genuine concern, and I felt grateful for her steady presence throughout this nightmare. "I keep expecting to see Dad walk through that door," I admitted, accepting the warm mug. "Remember how he always showed up late to everything because he got distracted by some bird or interesting cloud formation?" She smiled softly. "He was special that way, always finding wonder in ordinary things." Jessica had loved my parents, especially Mom's tendency to overfeed anyone who visited their house. What happens now with their estate? The next morning, we gathered in the law offices of Stevens, Martinez, and Associates for the formal reading of the will. Attorney Martha Stevens, a severe woman in her 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, adjusted her reading glasses and cleared her throat. Jake sat forward eagerly while I slumped in my chair, still processing the finality of our loss. "To my eldest son, Jacob Robert Fletcher," Martha began in her crisp professional tone, "I leave the family residence located at 1237 Ocean Drive in Miami Beach, Florida, valued at approximately $2 million. Jake's face lit up with satisfaction. The Miami mansion had been our parents' pride and joy, purchased during Dad's most successful years running his construction company. Martha continued reading the extensive list of Jake's inheritance, the investment portfolio worth $800,000, Mom's jewelry collection including her grandmother's emerald necklace, Dad's vintage Corvette, and the family business accounts. Each item felt like another confirmation of Jake's favored status. "To my younger son, Reed Thomas Fletcher." Martha's voice seemed to grow softer. "I leave the hunting cabin and surrounding property located in the Chugach Mountains of Alaska, along with $20,000 in cash designated for necessary repairs and improvements." The room fell silent. Jake actually chuckled under his breath. Brittany whispered something that sounded like seriously. Jessica's hand found mine, but I felt her tension. "There's an additional note here," Martha added, her eyebrows raised slightly. "Your parents specifically wrote that the cabin holds everything Reed needs to understand what truly matters, and that this gift will prove more valuable than any monetary inheritance when the time comes for true understanding." Jake's smirk was unmistakable. "Looks like Dad wanted to teach little brother about hard work and responsibility. That old shack hasn't been visited in 15 years. I stared at the legal documents Martha handed me, showing property maps of 47 acres in remote Alaska. The cabin's last assessment valued it at $38,000. My parents had essentially given Jake nearly $3 million while I received what amounted to a renovation project in the wilderness. Walking out of that law office, I felt hollow but not yet devastated. Jessica linked her arm through mine and said, "Maybe it'll be an adventure. We could visit this summer, do some hiking and camping." Her optimism felt forced, but I appreciated the effort. "Yeah," I replied, though my voice lacked conviction. Maybe Dad knew something we don't. Over the following week, I threw myself into researching the Alaskan property, determined to understand what my parents had been thinking. Online records showed minimal information. A 2-bedroom log cabin built in 1978, situated on 47.3 acres of mountain wilderness, approximately 90 miles northeast of Anchorage. Property taxes were current, paid automatically from an account I never knew existed. Jessica's enthusiasm faded quickly. She started making snide comments about my inheritance of garbage, while scrolling through real estate listings for Jake's Miami mansion on her phone. "Look at this infinity pool," she would say, showing me pictures of Jake's new backyard paradise. "And the view of Biscayne Bay is absolutely stunning." Meanwhile, Jake had begun stopping by Jessica's workplace at Morrison Marketing Group, bringing expensive coffee and pastries for the entire office staff, just trying to brighten everyone's day during this difficult time, he explained when I questioned his sudden generosity. Jessica defended these visits, saying Jake was being thoughtful and supportive. I noticed their text message frequency increasing dramatically. Jessica's phone buzzed constantly, and she would smile at the screen in ways that made my stomach twist. When I suggested we take a trip to Alaska together to assess the cabin's condition, Jessica exploded. "Are you completely insane, Reed? I'm not wasting my vacation days in some mosquito-infested wilderness so you can play lumberjack with a pile of rotten wood." Her voice carried a venom I had never heard before. "Jake is already talking about renovating the Miami place, adding a wine cellar and expanding the master suite. That's what successful people do with inheritances." The comparison stung because it highlighted everything I wasn't. While Jake discussed million-dollar renovations, I was planning camping trips to survey property damage. Jessica's friends started treating me differently too, offering pitying looks and comments about my challenging situation. One evening, I discovered a shopping bag from Cartier hidden in Jessica's closet while looking for my charging cable. Inside was an elegant $2,000 necklace with a gift card signed, "Thinking of you during this tough time, Jake." When I confronted Jessica about accepting expensive gifts from my brother, she became defensive and angry. "Jake is helping family during a hard time, which is more than I can say for your response to this whole situation," she snapped. "You're so paranoid and jealous of his success that you can't even appreciate when someone shows kindness." Her words felt like daggers, each one designed to make me feel small and unreasonable. "Kindness?" I shot back. "Since when does kindness cost $2,000? Since someone actually cares about making people feel better instead of wallowing in self-pity," Jessica replied coldly. "Maybe if you showed half the initiative Jake does, your parents would have trusted you with something more substantial." That night, Jessica announced she was moving in with her sister Amanda temporarily, claiming she needed space to think about our relationship. As she packed her bags, I watched 5 years of shared memories being stuffed into suitcases with cold efficiency. "This isn't about the inheritance," she said, not meeting my eyes. "This is about your complete lack of ambition or drive to improve our situation. Jake sees opportunities where you see obstacles." After she left, I sat in our empty apartment surrounded by the silence she had taken with her. The engagement ring remained hidden in my sock drawer, a symbol of dreams that felt increasingly foolish. I called my best friend Marcus, needing someone to talk sense into this chaos. "Dude, I hate to say this, but Jessica's been acting weird lately," Marcus admitted over the phone. "Sarah saw her at that new rooftop bar downtown last weekend, getting pretty cozy with some guy in an expensive suit. Sarah said they were holding hands and definitely looked like more than friends." My heart sank, though part of me already knew the truth I was refusing to face. Jake's sudden interest in Jessica's well-being, the expensive gifts, her defensive reactions to my questions, the pieces formed a picture I desperately wanted to ignore. The next morning, I drove to Jake's new mansion unannounced, needing to understand what was happening to my life. The Miami property was even more impressive in person. Mediterranean revival architecture with palm trees lining a circular driveway, and an infinity pool that seemed to blend seamlessly with the bay beyond. I found Jessica there in a designer bikini, lounging on a custom outdoor sectional that probably cost more than my annual salary. She looked guilty and startled when she saw me, quickly grabbing a cover-up. "Reed, what are you doing here?" Her voice was pitched higher than usual, the way it got when she was lying about something. "I came to talk to Jake about some legal questions regarding the estate," I replied, though that was completely untrue. "Didn't expect to find my fiancée here during work hours. I took a personal day," Jessica said defensively. "Jake invited me over to see the property, just as friends. We were discussing some marketing ideas for his real estate business." Jake emerged from the house carrying 2 tropical drinks, wearing board shorts and a confident smile. "Little brother, come to see how the other half lives." His tone was jovial, but his eyes held a coldness I was beginning to recognize. "Actually, I wanted to ask your advice about something," I lied smoothly. "This whole inheritance situation has me confused, and Jessica suggested you might have insights about Dad's intentions." Jake's expression shifted slightly, and he glanced at Jessica before responding. "Look, Reed, I think Dad was trying to teach you about responsibility and hard work. The cabin represents everything you need to learn about taking care of yourself and building something from nothing." He put his hand on Jessica's shoulder in a gesture that seemed far too intimate for casual friendship. "Maybe you're not ready for marriage anyway," Jake continued, his voice taking on a concerned older brother tone. "These kinds of life changes require maturity and financial stability. Jessica deserves security, not camping trips to Alaska." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, and I saw Jessica nodding along with his assessment of my shortcomings. Standing there beside that infinity pool, watching my brother and my fiancée dismiss my dreams while enjoying luxuries I could never provide, I felt something breaking inside my chest. The breaking point came 3 days later when Marcus called with news that shattered whatever illusions I had left. His voice was tight with anger and sympathy when he delivered the devastating blow. "Reed, I'm sorry to be the one telling you this, but Sarah and I saw Jessica and Jake at Meridian last night." Meridian was Portland's most expensive restaurant, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance. They weren't just having dinner, man. They were all over each other, kissing between courses, holding hands across the table. Jake had his arm around her the whole time, and Jessica was looking at him like she used to look at you. I felt the blood drain from my face as Marcus continued. They were acting like a couple that had been together for months, not like something new. Sarah said Jessica was wearing a different expensive necklace, and Jake kept whispering things in her ear that made her laugh. "I'm really sorry, dude. You deserve to know the truth." After hanging up, I sat in my car outside the office building where Jessica worked, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. Everything made sense now, the expensive gifts, the defensive reactions, her sudden dissatisfaction with our life together. My own brother and the woman I planned to marry had been conducting an affair right under my nose. That evening, I drove to Jake's mansion with a mix of devastation and determination burning in my chest. I found them exactly where I expected, by the pool, sharing wine and intimate conversation under string lights that cast romantic shadows across the deck. Jessica wore a flowing sundress I had never seen before, and Jake had traded his usual business attire for casual linen that somehow made him look even more sophisticated. They saw me approaching and both stood up with expressions of guilty panic. Jessica's face went pale while Jake straightened his shoulders, preparing for confrontation. "Before either of you say anything," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "I know about Meridian. I know about the secret text messages. I know this has been going on for weeks, probably since the funeral." Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Reed, I can explain. No need for explanations," I interrupted. "I just want to hear it directly from both of you. No more lies. No more pretending this is about my lack of ambition or your need for space to think." Jake stepped forward, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the older brother who used to defend me on school playgrounds. But that protective instinct had been replaced by something calculated and cold. "You're right," Jake said simply. "Jessica and I have developed feelings for each other. We didn't plan for this to happen, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns." "Unexpected turns?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean sometimes opportunistic people take advantage of family tragedies to steal what doesn't belong to them?" Jessica found her voice then, and the words that came out of her mouth destroyed whatever remained of my love for her. "Reed, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I can't pretend anymore. You're a pathetic loser who inherited a rotting shack in the middle of nowhere because even your own parents knew you'd never amount to anything substantial." Her cruelty took my breath away. This was the woman who had comforted me through my parents' death, who had claimed to love my gentle nature and environmental passions. "Jake owns a mansion, drives a Porsche, and actually has a future," Jessica continued, her voice growing stronger with each cutting word. "He can provide security, luxury, and opportunities. I deserve better than your mediocre dreams and empty promises about someday making a difference in the world." Jake put his arm around Jessica's waist possessively, pulling her against his side. "Sorry, little brother, but sometimes the better man wins. Jessica deserves someone who can give her the life she wants, not camping trips and nature photography." Standing there, watching them together, seeing how easily Jessica fit into Jake's world of expensive tastes and material success, I realized I had been living in a fantasy. The woman I thought I knew, kind, supportive, interested in building a life based on love rather than luxury, had never really existed. "You're absolutely right," I said quietly, surprising them both with my calm acceptance. "Jessica does deserve someone who shares her values and priorities. And Jake, you definitely won the better prize. Congratulations to both of you." I pulled my grandmother's engagement ring from my pocket and set it on their patio table. "Consider this my wedding gift. I hope you'll be very happy together." Walking away from that mansion, I felt something shifting inside my chest. The pain was overwhelming, but underneath it was something else, a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I could see my situation clearly without the fog of denial and false hope. That night, I made 3 phone calls. First, I called my boss at Environmental Solutions Northwest and quit my job, explaining that I needed to take care of family property in Alaska. Second, I called my landlord and gave 30 days' notice on the apartment that no longer felt like home. Third, I booked a one-way ticket to Anchorage, departing in 5 days. If Jessica and Jake wanted to build their relationship on materialism and status, they were welcome to each other. I was going to find out what my parents really meant when they said the cabin held everything I needed to understand what truly matters. For the first time since the funeral, I felt like I was moving toward something instead of running away from my problems. Alaska represented a complete unknown, but it also represented freedom from the life that had just collapsed around me. The flight from Portland to Anchorage felt like crossing into another world entirely. As the Boeing 737 descended through thick clouds, I caught my first glimpse of Alaska's vast wilderness, endless mountains, pristine lakes, and forests that stretched beyond the horizon. Everything I owned that mattered now fit into 2 large duffel bags and a backpack containing camping gear, basic tools, and enough food supplies to last several weeks. At Anchorage's rental car counter, the cheerful agent named Doug warned me about the remote location I was heading toward. "That's pretty far off the beaten path," he said, highlighting the route on a paper map. "Cell service cuts out about 40 miles north of here. You sure you know what you're getting into?" The 4-hour drive north took me through increasingly spectacular and isolated terrain. Highway 3 wound through mountain passes where snow still clung to peaks despite the late spring season. I passed through small towns with names like Wasilla and Talkeetna, each one smaller and more rustic than the last, until finally I was following gravel roads with no towns at all. The property was even more remote than I had imagined. Following coordinates from the legal documents, I turned off the main gravel road onto what could barely be called a trail, winding through dense spruce and birch forest for nearly 6 miles before reaching the cabin site. My first sight of the inheritance my parents had left me was devastating. The log cabin squatted in a clearing like a wounded animal. Its roof partially collapsed, windows either broken or boarded up with weathered plywood. The front porch sagged dangerously, and moss had begun claiming the foundation stones. This wasn't just neglect, this was 15 years of harsh Alaskan weather slowly reclaiming what humans had built. I parked the rental car and sat for several minutes, absorbing the magnitude of the project ahead of me. The surrounding wilderness was breathtaking, towering peaks in every direction, a crystal-clear stream running along the property's eastern border, and silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. But the cabin itself looked like it would require months of work just to become habitable. Setting up my tent beside the ruins, I tried to maintain optimism At least I had camping experience from college environmental research trips. The stream provided fresh water, and I had brought a portable camp stove for cooking. As evening approached, I built a fire in a stone circle someone had constructed years ago, probably my father during his hunting trips. That first night, sitting beside the crackling flames under a canopy of stars brighter than anything visible from Portland, I had my complete emotional breakdown. All the pain and betrayal I had been suppressing since the funeral came pouring out in racking sobs that echoed across the empty wilderness. "Why did you leave me this?" I shouted into the darkness, addressing my absent parents. "What am I supposed to do with a falling-down cabin in the middle of nowhere?" Jessica was right. I'm a complete failure who can't even inherit property correctly. The grief felt endless, wave after wave of loss washing over me. I mourned my parents, my relationship with Jessica, my illusions about Jake's brotherly love, and my naive belief that good intentions would somehow lead to good outcomes. Everything I had counted on for stability and happiness had been stripped away, leaving me alone in the Alaskan wilderness with nothing but camping gear and $20,000 that wouldn't even cover the cabin's roof repairs. But as dawn broke over the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink I had never witnessed in the city, something shifted inside my chest. The silence that had felt oppressive the night before now seemed peaceful. The isolation that had frightened me began feeling like freedom from all the expectations and judgments that had been weighing me down. I spent the morning exploring the property boundaries, following survey markers through the forest. 47 acres was substantial, nearly 3 times the size of a city block, stretching from the stream up the mountainside to a ridge that offered spectacular views of the surrounding peaks. Wildlife signs were everywhere. Deer tracks, bear scat that made me grateful for the bear canister I had brought for food storage, and bird species I had only seen in field guides. Inside the cabin, the damage was extensive but not hopeless. The main room's log walls were solid, though the chinking needed complete replacement. Upstairs, one bedroom was uninhabitable due to roof damage, but the other remained relatively dry. The kitchen was a disaster of rusted appliances and rodent damage, but the stone fireplace looked structurally sound. While clearing debris from the main room, I discovered treasures that made my heart race with connection to my father. Scattered throughout the cabin were hunting journals dating back 20 years, filled with Dad's careful observations about weather patterns, animal behavior, and seasonal changes. His handwriting, so familiar from birthday cards and homework help during my childhood, made me feel less alone. The journal entries revealed a side of my father I had never known. His love for this place was evident on every page. But more than that, he wrote about finding peace here that he couldn't find anywhere else. "The cabin represents everything I value most," he wrote in one entry. "Simplicity, connection to the natural world, and the kind of quiet that lets a man hear his own thoughts clearly." But scattered throughout these nature observations were cryptic references that puzzled me. "Surface beauty hiding deeper treasures," he wrote. "Something special beneath what others overlook. The real value lies underground, waiting for someone with eyes to see." These phrases appeared repeatedly, always in the context of the property itself rather than philosophical musings about life. One journal entry, dated just 6 months before his death, contained a passage that made me pause. "Reed will understand what I'm really leaving him. Jake would see only $signs and missed opportunities, but Reed has always found value in what others consider worthless. This place holds secrets that will vindicate my faith in my younger son." Reading those words beside the dying campfire, I felt the first spark of hope I had experienced since the funeral. My father had chosen this inheritance deliberately, with specific intentions that went far beyond teaching me responsibility or hard work. There were secrets here, hidden meanings that I was supposed to discover. The second night's sleep was deeper and more peaceful than any I had experienced in weeks. Despite sleeping on the ground in a tent, surrounded by wilderness that could hide bears or worse, I felt safer than I had in my Portland apartment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, at least they would be honest challenges, fixing roof leaks and chopping firewood instead of navigating betrayal and emotional manipulation. By the third day, I was beginning to feel like myself again for the first time since my parents' death. The physical labor of clearing debris, assessing structural damage, and planning repairs gave me purpose and focus. My environmental science background proved surprisingly useful. I could identify which trees needed cutting for safety, assess water quality in the stream, and recognize signs of soil erosion that needed addressing. But more importantly, I was starting to understand what my father had seen in this place. Stripped of all the material comforts and social expectations that had defined my life in Portland, I was discovering who Reed Fletcher actually was beneath all those external pressures. The man emerging from this wilderness experience felt stronger, more confident, and more aligned with values that actually mattered to me. Whatever secrets my father had hidden here, I was determined to find them. And whatever Jessica and Jake were building together in their mansion of material success, I was beginning to realize I had received the better inheritance after all. On my fourth morning at the cabin, I began a systematic exploration of every inch of the property, approaching it like the environmental assessment projects I used to conduct for my consulting firm. Armed with a notebook, measuring tape, and digital camera, I documented everything from soil composition to drainage patterns, treating the land like a research subject rather than just inherited property. Behind the cabin, partially hidden by 15 years of undergrowth, I discovered what appeared to be a hunting blind built into the hillside. But as I cleared away the brambles and deadfall, the structure revealed itself to be far more sophisticated than any simple wildlife observation post. The entrance was camouflaged so expertly that I almost missed it completely, disguised as a natural outcropping of rocks and fallen logs. Inside, my flashlight revealed a space that made my heart race with excitement and confusion. This wasn't a hunting blind, it was a fully equipped underground laboratory. Waterproof cases lined shelves carved into the rock walls, containing computers, scientific instruments, and survey equipment worth tens of thousands of dollars. Everything was sealed and preserved, waiting for discovery by someone who knew where to look. The computers booted up perfectly, their hard drives containing files that revolutionized my understanding of why my parents had left me this property. Folder after folder of geological surveys, mineral assessments, and soil analysis reports painted a picture that took my breath away. My father hadn't been coming here to hunt, he had been conducting secret mineral exploration for over 2 decades. Working with a private geological consulting firm called Northern Minerals Assessment, Dad had systematically mapped the subsurface composition of the entire property. The reports, signed by certified geologists and backed by core sample analysis, revealed extensive lithium deposits throughout the land, along with significant concentrations of rare earth metals, essential for electric vehicle batteries and renewable energy technology. I sat in that underground laboratory reading report after report, each one more astonishing than the last. The preliminary estimates valued the mineral deposits at between $400 million and $600 million, depending on market conditions and extraction methods. This wasn't just land, this was one of the largest undeveloped lithium reserves in North America, hidden beneath what everyone assumed was worthless wilderness. My hands shook as I found contact information for Dr. Sarah Thompson, the lead geologist who had been working with my father. Using the satellite internet connection Dad had somehow managed to establish in this remote location, I sent her an email explaining who I was and requesting a phone consultation about the surveys. Her response came within hours, and her enthusiasm was palpable even through text. "Reed, your father spoke of you often during our phone calls. I've been waiting for someone to contact me about the property. Can you call me immediately? There's so much to discuss." The phone conversation that followed changed my understanding of everything. Dr. Thompson, a woman in her 50s with 3 decades of geological experience, explained that my father had been one of the most methodical and secretive clients she had ever worked with. Robert paid us privately for all survey work, insisting that no records be filed with any government agencies until after his death, she explained. He said the discovery had to go to the right person, someone who would develop it responsibly rather than simply strip mine for maximum profit. He spoke about you frequently, describing your environmental science background and ethical approach to natural resource management. The surveys had been conducted during Dad's annual hunting trips, with core samples extracted under the cover of wilderness exploration. The lithium deposits were particularly valuable because they were near surface, accessible through environmentally responsible extraction methods that would minimize ecological impact. Your father was adamant that Jake never learn about the mineral deposits. Dr. Thompson continued. He said Jake would turn the property into an environmental disaster zone within 6 months, caring only about profit margins and investor returns. But he believed you would find a way to develop the resources while preserving the land's natural beauty. As I absorbed this information, pieces of the inheritance puzzle fell into place. The cryptic journal entries, the specific language in the will about understanding what truly matters, The seemingly strange decision to leave me property rather than cash. My father had been planning this revelation for years, but Dr. Thompson had more shocking information to share. Reed, there's something else you need to know about your brother. Your father hired a private investigator about 3 years ago to look into Jake's business practices. The evidence we found was deeply disturbing. My stomach dropped as she continued. Jake has been embezzling money from your family's construction business for years, using funds designated for your mother's cancer treatment to finance his luxury lifestyle. Your father gathered extensive documentation but died before he could confront Jake about the theft. The underground laboratory contained a fireproof safe I hadn't noticed earlier. Inside, I found financial records, bank statements, and forensic accounting reports that painted a picture of systematic theft spanning 3 years. Jake had been forging checks, redirecting payments, and falsifying business records to steal nearly $500,000 from the company that was supposed to fund Mom's medical treatments and their retirement. The evidence was overwhelming and professionally documented. Jake's signatures were verified on fraudulent transactions. His bank accounts showed deposits that corresponded to missing business funds, and the paper trail was meticulous enough to support federal charges. My father had been building a criminal case against his own eldest son, while secretly preparing to ensure the family's real wealth went to the child he could trust. Sitting in that hidden laboratory surrounded by evidence of Jake's betrayal and the property's incredible value, I felt a transformation beginning inside my chest. This wasn't about inheritance anymore, this was about justice. Jake had stolen money meant to save our mother's life while positioning himself as the responsible son who deserved the family's trust and resources. Jessica's cruel words about my parents, knowing I would never amount to anything, took on a bitter irony. My parents had known exactly who each of their sons really was, and they had planned accordingly. The broken cabin that everyone pitied was actually the foundation for one of the most valuable mineral discoveries in Alaska's history. I spent the rest of the day studying the geological reports and financial evidence, planning my next moves with the methodical approach my father had taught me through his example. Jake and Jessica thought they had won the ultimate prize by stealing each other from me, but they had actually positioned themselves perfectly for their own destruction. The wilderness that had seemed like exile a week ago now felt like a strategic headquarters. I had everything I needed to expose Jake's crimes and reveal the property's true value, but timing would be crucial. Jake's overconfidence would be his downfall, and Jessica's materialistic priorities would make her choose the wrong side when the truth finally emerged. For the first time since my parents' funeral, I felt genuinely excited about the future, not because of the money, though $500 million would obviously change my life, but because justice was finally within reach. My parents had trusted me with more than property, they had trusted me with the responsibility to do what was right. 2 weeks later, I stood in the law offices of Walsh, Davidson, and Associates in downtown Portland, watching attorney Patricia Walsh review the mountain of evidence I had brought back from Alaska. Patricia specialized in inheritance fraud and embezzlement cases, with a reputation for devastating cross-examinations and meticulous case preparation. This is the most comprehensive documentation of family financial fraud I've ever encountered, Patricia said, her sharp eyes scanning through bank records and geological surveys. Your father essentially built us a bulletproof case. Between the embezzlement evidence and the mineral rights discovery, your brother's inheritance can be voided completely, and he'll likely face federal charges. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, consulting with Dr. Thompson's geological team to verify all mineral assessments, and working with forensic accountants to trace every stolen dollar. The lithium deposits were confirmed to be worth between $500 million and $600 million, making the property one of the most valuable undeveloped mineral sites in North America. But more importantly, I had discovered that Jake's thefts had directly impacted Mom's cancer treatment. Medical bills that should have been covered by business insurance were denied because Jake had let policies lapse to redirect premium payments into his personal accounts. Mom's experimental treatment options were limited because Jake had stolen funds designated for medical emergencies. What's our strategy? I asked Patricia, though I already knew the answer. Total exposure, she replied with a predatory smile. Your brother has spent years building a public reputation as a successful businessman. We're going to reveal exactly how that success was financed, in front of everyone who matters to him. Jake was hosting a celebration party at his Miami mansion that weekend, ostensibly to toast his successful real estate ventures but really to show off his inherited wealth to Portland's business community. He had flown several potential investors and business partners down for the event, along with Jessica and her social circle. The party was being catered by the city's most expensive restaurant, with entertainment that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Patricia and I flew to Miami with enough evidence to destroy Jake's life completely. We arrived at the mansion during peak party hours, when the backyard was filled with influential guests, sampling gourmet appetizers and admiring Jake's lifestyle. Jake saw me approaching across the deck, and his face went through a fascinating transformation: surprise, guilt, fear, and then forced confidence as he convinced himself I was there to congratulate him or beg for forgiveness. Read. He called out loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "My little brother decided to join us. How's life in the great wilderness? Ready to give up on that cabin project and rejoin civilization?" Jessica appeared beside him wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent had been in Portland. She looked nervous but defiant, clearly hoping I was there to provide some kind of closure to our messy breakup. "Actually, Jake, I wanted to thank you publicly for everything you've taught me about family values," I said, my voice carrying across the conversation nearby guests were having about real estate investments and business opportunities. Patricia stepped forward with a briefcase full of documents, introducing herself as my attorney. "We have some information to share about how Jake's successful lifestyle has been financed," she announced clearly. The transformation in Jake's expression was immediate and devastating. Color drained from his face as Patricia began distributing copies of bank records to the assembled guests. These documents show systematic embezzlement from the Fletcher family construction business over a 3-year period, she explained in her courtroom voice. Jake Fletcher stole nearly $500,000 designated for his mother's cancer treatment to finance his luxury purchases, Patricia continued, holding up receipts for Jake's Porsche, jewelry, and expensive vacations. "Every guest at this party is enjoying hospitality paid for with money stolen from a dying woman's medical fund." The silence that fell over the pool deck was deafening. Business associates and potential investors stared at the evidence in their hands, realizing they were accessories to fraud simply by accepting Jake's hospitality. Jessica's face had gone completely white as she processed the implications. "That's completely false." Jake finally managed to stammer, but his voice lacked conviction, and everyone present could hear the guilt. I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording we had discovered in Dad's safe. Jake's voice on a phone call with a business associate discussing how to redirect medical payments without the old man noticing. The recording was clear enough that several guests gasped audibly. "The FBI will be investigating these crimes, along with the Internal Revenue Service for tax fraud," Patricia announced. "We expect federal charges to be filed within the week." But I wasn't finished. "There's more," I said, enjoying the way Jake's panic was escalating. "My inheritance wasn't the worthless property everyone assumed. The cabin sits on lithium deposits worth over $500 million. The crowd's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several business associates who had been discussing investment opportunities with Jake suddenly looked like they had been slapped. Jessica made a sound that might have been a sob or a gasp. "Dad knew exactly what he was leaving each of his sons," I continued, addressing the assembled crowd. "He left the thief a mansion built on stolen money that will be seized by federal authorities, while giving the honest son mineral rights worth $500 million. Jake finally found his voice, but it came out as a pathetic whimper. "Reed, we can work something out. Family shouldn't fight over money. Maybe we can share the mining rights, split everything fairly." Jessica stepped forward desperately. "Reed, I made a terrible mistake. I realize now that Jake manipulated both of us. Can we talk privately about fixing this?" The irony was delicious. 3 weeks ago, Jessica had called me a pathetic loser whose parents knew I would never amount to anything. Now, faced with the reality that I controlled $500 million while Jake faced federal prison time, she wanted to fix our relationship. "Jessica, you were absolutely right about one thing," I said, enjoying the desperate hope that flashed in her eyes. "You do deserve someone who shares your values and priorities. Jake stole from dying cancer patients to fund his lifestyle, which seems perfectly aligned with your definition of success. Patricia served Jake with legal papers freezing all his assets pending the criminal investigation. The mansion, the Porsche, the jewelry, everything would be seized as evidence of criminal activity. The business associates and investors fled the party like rats, abandoning a sinking ship, clearly documenting their phone numbers and distancing themselves from association with Jake's crimes. "The federal courthouse has already issued warrants for your arrest, Jake," Patricia announced. "You can surrender voluntarily on Monday morning, or they'll come find you. Either way, your days of living off stolen money are finished." Walking away from that mansion for the second time, I felt a profound sense of completion. Justice had been served, truth had been revealed, and the people who had betrayed me were facing consequences that matched their actions. Jake would likely spend several years in federal prison. Jessica would forever be associated with dating a convicted embezzler, and everyone in their social circle now knew exactly how their luxury lifestyle had been financed. But more importantly, I had discovered who I really was beneath all the external expectations and social pressures. The broken cabin that had seemed like a consolation prize was actually the foundation for a life that would honor my parents' values, while securing my financial future beyond anything I could have imagined. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my new home in Alaska, watching the sunrise paint the mountain peaks in shades of gold and crimson that still took my breath away every morning. The sustainable mining operation I had developed was now employing 47 local workers and serving as a model for environmentally responsible mineral extraction throughout North America. The original cabin remained exactly where my parents had left it, preserved as a memorial to my father's vision and the journey that had brought me here. But nearby, nestled into the mountainside with minimal environmental impact, my new home was built entirely from renewable materials and powered by a combination of solar panels and micro-hydroelectric generators fed by the stream. Dr. Sarah Thompson had become far more than my geological consultant. 3 months ago, I had proposed to her beside the memorial cabin, offering my grandmother's ring to a woman who understood both the scientific value of what we were building and the deeper meaning of environmental stewardship. Our wedding was planned for next summer, with the ceremony taking place beside the stream where my father had found his peace. Sarah brought her laptop onto the deck, where we reviewed the quarterly reports from Fletcher Sustainable Mining. The operation was extracting lithium and rare earth metals using revolutionary techniques that actually improved soil quality and water purity while generating zero toxic waste. Environmental groups that had initially protested the mining permits now used our site as an example of how industrial development could enhance rather than damage natural ecosystems. The financial returns were staggering. Conservative estimates valued the extracted minerals at $800 million over the next decade. But more importantly, the operation was creating jobs and economic development throughout rural Alaska while maintaining the pristine beauty that had first captured my heart. I had established the Robert and Linda Memorial Foundation using the first year's profits, funding environmental science scholarships at universities across the Pacific Northwest, and supporting cancer research initiatives at 3 major medical centers. The Foundation's first scholarship recipients included 12 students from low-income families who shared my parents' passion for finding balance between economic development and environmental protection. Jake had served 18 months in federal minimum security prison and was now working at a used car dealership in suburban Phoenix, his assets seized to pay restitution to the families his embezzlement had affected. The Miami mansion had been sold at auction, with proceeds going to cancer patients who couldn't afford experimental treatments. Jake's real estate license had been permanently revoked, and his criminal record meant he would never again work in financial services or property development. Jessica had married a businessman 20 years her senior within 6 months of Jake's conviction, desperate to restore the financial security she had lost when she chose the wrong Fletcher brother. But Portland's social circles had long memories, and her reputation as someone who abandoned terminally ill patients for embezzled money meant she would never be fully accepted in the circles she aspired to join. Her new husband kept her on a tight financial leash, having learned about her materialistic tendencies from the very public scandal that had ended her relationship with me. From my deck, I could see the environmental research station Sarah and I were developing in partnership with the University of Alaska. Graduate students came here to study sustainable mining techniques, wildlife preservation, and the intersection of economic development with ecological responsibility. The research we published was influencing mining operations from Chile to Australia, proving that extractive industries could actually enhance rather than degrade natural environments. But beyond the professional success and financial security, I had discovered something far more valuable than lithium deposits. Living here had taught me that true wealth comes from alignment between your values and your daily actions. from building something meaningful rather than simply accumulating possessions, and from relationships based on shared principles rather than material convenience. Sarah and I spent our evenings planning the next phase of our operation, a renewable energy research facility that would use our mining profits to develop better solar panel technology and more efficient battery storage systems. We were creating a legacy that would honor my parents' memory while contributing to solutions for climate change and energy independence. Every morning, I visited the memorial cabin where this journey had begun. The hidden laboratory remained exactly as my father had left it, preserved as a reminder of how patience, planning, and faith in the future could create opportunities that seemed impossible from the outside. Sometimes I wondered what my life would have looked like if Jessica hadn't betrayed me, if Jake had remained the brother I thought I knew, if my parents had divided their inheritance differently. But those alternate realities felt pale and incomplete compared to what I had actually built here in the wilderness that had initially seemed like exile. The broken cabin that everyone pitied had contained the seeds of a life beyond my wildest dreams, not because of the money, though $500 million certainly opened doors, but because the journey of discovering those mineral deposits had revealed who I really was. When stripped of all external expectations and social pressures, my parents had left me exactly what I needed, a test of character that would either destroy me or transform me into someone capable of handling extraordinary responsibility. The inheritance that seemed like punishment had actually been their final gift, the chance to become the man they always believed I could be. Standing on my deck with Sarah beside me, surrounded by the pristine wilderness we were protecting while building something significant for future generations, I felt the deep contentment that comes from living in complete alignment with your values. This was what my father had meant when he wrote that the cabin would teach me what truly matters. The sunrise completed its transformation of the mountain peaks, and I realized that every morning here felt like a new beginning, another chance to build something meaningful in a world that often prioritizes quick profits over long-term sustainability. The man who had arrived here broken and betrayed was gone, replaced by someone who understood that real success meant creating value that would outlast your own lifetime. I hope this story has resonated with you and maybe reminded you of times when life's apparent setbacks turned into unexpected opportunities. Have you ever experienced a situation where something that initially seemed like a loss or disappointment ended up being exactly what you needed to grow into who you were meant to become? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please hit the like button to let me know, and consider subscribing for more stories about finding strength and purpose in life's most challenging moments. Sharing this story with friends or family members who might need to hear about resilience and second chances would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me from that broken cabin in Alaska to discovering what really matters in life. May you always have the courage to look beneath the surface and find the hidden treasures in whatever inheritance life has given you.